postgraduate students, but I'm from Yogyakarta. And why I choose this topic, technology integration and autonomous learning, because when I joined teacher training in Solo, the topic at that time is about the technology integration and autonomous learning. So that's why I'm curious about the participant at that time. How about their views? How about their voice related to the technology integration? Because like the presence of internet and the rapid change in technology give remarkable progress in learning and teaching environment. That's why some researchers, educators, practitioners from various disciplines around the world reported that there are various ICT-based learning activities. If we go to both national and international conference or workshop, yes, right now we are discussing about the technology or yes, the digital, because we are in the digital era. And integrating technology into the classroom, I think.
The title of my presentation is quite specific. It's YouTube Community Contribution, Collaborative and Co-Creative Online Learning in Audio-Visual Translation Study. So I have to highlight the audio-visual translation, since in my opinion, the community contribution is tailor-made for audio-visual translation study. So for those of you who are not aware, audio-visual translation study is the translations of audio-visual materials. Some people might call it movie translation, but that's not really accurate actually, because it's not always about movie. So this will be the. Before that, I would like to highlight the outline of my presentation. So the first slide, I will be discussing about the reason why I chose YouTube. Like I said earlier, YouTube probably is tailor-made, but I will also like to emphasize on different opinion of why I chose YouTube as my platform of research. And then on the second part, I will be discussing on the how I do this research, which is actually quite simple. And then on the last part, I will discuss the result I forgot, but it will be on my paper later on. So, first of all, why do I choose this platform, YouTube? First of all, according to Flag, it is easy to use. So I am using other people's work, because if I say it's easy to use, you probably say, yeah, that says you, not me. Okay, so it is based on the research by Flag that YouTube actually is easy to use. And then, as a lecturer, if we are using YouTube, you will never run out of videos to share or to.
So let me introduce myself first. My name is Teguh Aribowo, and you can call me Teguh or Ari. And then today, in the schedule, in the first plan, I wanted to explain about the teacher's perception on the using video, but apparently I got a problem, because I took the data from an online course, and at the time I tried to ask for permission for the facilitator or the one who developed this online course, but it seems that they do not want to share the data to the public. So, but I am allowed to present my experience in using or in experiencing the online course. Even though actually in this research I also did with the same methodology or with the same method, then I will explain later. sorry, my laptop is quite long when it's.
And then the second one is students sleeping in the class. They make the distractions for teachers and even for other students, like I have done before when I was student in junior high school, because I came from Pesantren, so I often sleep in the class like this. Then, so what should teachers do to make this classroom, this effective classroom, or even like this? So yeah, I present something writing teaching journal. As according to 2007, writing teaching journal can be used by language teachers after they do their teaching practice. And then before we go to the next slide, I have the three keywords here. The first one is KPL, the second one is student teachers, and then the last one is teaching journal itself. The first one is KPL, or praktik pengalaman lapangan. It is the one for teaching practice in Indonesia, and then it is done by the students of education majors in most of.
Maybe all of you here already know about Edmodo, right? You know about Edmodo? Some of you know, some of you don't. Okay. Edmodo is a mobile application which is fully equipped with an online profile as well as with the communication structure, so that the users are able to post a text, to post a picture, to give comments, as well as to share a favorite post as well. And then in incorporating Edmodo in the language learning process, it is very expected for the language teachers to first guide the learners as well as to start an initial learning activity in which the teachers have to introduce the learning topic, the learning materials, as well as the learning objective. Language tasks, for example, such as a writing task starting into one of the particular genre of the text, such as take-home text, and then the teacher can also give directions for the learners to post their writing draft into the Edmodo. And back when I was in my bachelor degree, one of my 21 items and learning motivation that consists of 50 items. And the data were then analyzed through correlational statistics using Pearson programming. The findings show that the mean scores of the students for learner autonomy is 3.44 from the second semester, 3.51 from the second semester, 3.34 from the fourth semester, and 3.43 from the sixth semester. So based on the mean scores, all students' learner autonomy was categorized as somewhat autonomous, and they had a moderate level of learning motivation. Let me explain again that somewhat autonomous means the students are autonomous and non-autonomous in some ways. Okay? Their autonomous learning is cultivated when, first, they need an assessment that they lack their autonomy or consider as non-autonomous when they have to arrange time management. The second, when they meet a challenge in the classroom. And third, when they have to stimulate their interest in language learning. Okay, and the next slide. It's about 45 to 51%. And then they hope that the lecturers have more than one teaching material when teaching the course. And then this is kind of evaluative thing that students have for topics student think beneficial. Yeah, once again I said that to be distributed
terms of sound, was very beneficial. So it contains 75%, and then intonations, less phonetic syllables. So these kinds of materials are included in the syllabus, the content of syllabus that we designed. And then for morphology, they think that word and plan as a word and expressive, and also about the productivity of word formation. And then the last for syntax, they think that it's beneficial for them to study about syntax and grammar, constituency, trees and rules, word categories, and generative grammar. And then for the open-ended question, the students give some suggestions for each.
More time to pause to think about the answer. It spends about 3 or 5 minutes. Meanwhile, the note-taking students, they spend shorter time. Not directly answer, but the pause is just shorter. Okay, this is the suggestions for both the teacher and the suggestion. So for the teacher here, they need to take time to explain the very beginning in the terms, the very beginning of the term of the semester about this note taking. So the students can be familiar of these kinds of note taking. Especially there are a lot of kinds of note taking, but I take only one, the Cornell one. And the second make the students familiar, it deals with the first one. And the third, do not give the students so many complicated materials at once. Because the more complicated they are, the more confused they will be. Avoid to give them so many handouts. This is very encourage the students to take notes in their own words. For the students, it still have a relationship with the last point of the teacher. Do not transcribe every single word that the teacher say, only the key points. And it's better if they use simpler sentences so they can understand easily. The second one, the students need to review the notes on the suggested on the same day, and it will be the choices of media to take notes is also taken into consideration, whether by pen, whether by paper.
Using this microphone, because I'm afraid that my voice is not audible enough. As you can see, let me introduce myself. My name is Roman Azari. I am from Universitas Jambi. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. I would like to talk to you about my research concerning with the communicative competence of the service teachers at Universitas Jambi in Jambi. I also have my research partner, Andre Rizal, but he couldn't manage to come, and I'm sorry for that. But let's start with the write-up. This research is inspired from several problems that I have listed in the slide, on the slides. The first reason is that mostly our graduates have not performed their communicative competence appropriately. What I mean by have not performed appropriate communicative competence, that they don't really used to use English as their language of instruction. So that's why this is becoming a big reason of doing this research. And the second research is the pre-service teachers have not, the pre-service teachers, I don't know, I used to use this term, and other people will use it as teachers to be, or
would be teachers.
Teachers to be, future teachers.
Would be teachers.
Would be teachers, okay. They also have not shown their competence in using the language while they were doing the teaching practice in schools, or we call it PPL. And even though they have been enriched for, what do you call that, 6 semesters by using English. Oh, sorry, PPL Universitas Jambi, the unit where something to do with the students of pre-service first teachers have not really provided an appropriate instrument in assessing their communicative language. So they only provide something that we call UKG, that only assess 4 general competence like pedagogy, personality.
They need to be creative. They need to be able to think creatively, work creatively with others, act on them to contribute some innovation. And to complete all the courses here, right now they also need to be autonomous. This is for their own sake, so that after they finish school, they can still learn by themselves. Okay? According to Benson, this is the narrow definition of autonomous learning. It means having the capacity to take control of their own learning. And here, willingness is also included. They need to be able to have the willingness to study, to take control of their own learning. In a broad sense, autonomous learning also means being critical thinkers so as to realize their human potential. The last one is for their further studies after they finish school, so in their everyday life. So these are the demands in the 21st century.
Actually, there are many theories in autonomy or autonomous learning or autonomous learners, but I only pick up 2. This is a social constructivist theory and agency in autonomy research. First is called social constructivist framework. And then the implication why I use social constructivist and the role of agency in learning autonomous. First is classroom practices should be carried out as the way to promote autonomous learning, and the second, different characteristics of learners. Diverse characteristics of learners. Different process, for example, store, retrieve information, different learning strategies, believable language learning, and different approaches in learning. This is also the idea why I
slide theoretical framework, and there will be methodology, and followed by finding, and followed by questions, and there will be Q&A, and we'll close this presentation for 30 minutes. Alright, so this is my very simple introductions. This is my second work on literature with the students try to promote readings by using classical English literature. And from the first research, I found that 80 to 85% of my students are encouraged to read more literature after we do the literature circle. But then I find out the rest, 80 to 15 students are not that motivated, and I'm going to find out and try to use another way of doing literature circle and encourage the result. And first of all, they should be clear then why should a teacher promote readings. Of course, this is some of my personal findings that I find out some of my students they don't really they simply read because they have to, and then it's just like obligations. And then many of my students, they are not familiar with the English literature. Some of them are familiar with like the Diary of Wimpy Kids or things like the popular literature. But in terms of classical one, it's really hard. And when we go to the Indonesian Reading Index, it's only 1 out of 1,000 who are would like to read in the area. And when we go to PISA, we just get depend Brazil and Botswana in the 61 ranking. And of course, last one at least is mentions about the importance of reading.
In 2016 shows that Indonesia is the 60th from 61 surveyed countries, which is second lowest country in literacy level. And the problems that they got is insufficient vocabularies, anxiety, lack of prior knowledge, etc. And because of that, the development of technology in the world is rising up right now. And it's because the millennial generation, or can we say the Z generation, they are savvy to internet, and as an educator, we need to use that technology into our surrounding, to our teaching and learning process. So because of that, we need different strategy of teaching reading. And my research question is, how does gamification mobility?
Mrs. Juliana Ambasari and Mr. Dwi Rorin M. Insana. And the title of the presentation is Peer Learning Under Dominance Level for English Students Entrepreneurship Output. And then Mr. and Mrs. welcome you to deliver the presentation.
Thank you,
Miss Dian.
Hello everybody, good afternoon, my name is Ambar. I'm from, as you can see, Universitas Indra Prasta PDRI. Maybe once you ever lived in about Tanjung Balai, Jakarta, you know this campus. So I'm with my colleague, Mr. Dwi Rorin and Insana, or Mr. Rorin. And here I would like to share an article titled Peer Learning Under Dominancy Level for English Students Entrepreneurship Output. Okay, so this is we're going to talk primary notes, literature review, methodology, course of action, and then findings and conclusion. So before we begin this research, we analyze our students' needs. So actually, I don't teach entrepreneur, but he teaches entrepreneur. So I teach speaking. So I want to see the connection between entrepreneur and speaking. So we collaborate together, and we see the background. We see the background problems of entrepreneur class. So most of my students first does not feel any interest to entrepreneur. I don't know why. Maybe because of the lecturer, or because of what promises entrepreneur does not or has not fulfilled their expectation, and most of them tend to feel shy to do it. Miss, how come I can sell milk? How come I can sell bread? How come I can sell donut? Okay, that's what they say. And they also say if they do entrepreneur, they learn English. How come they inject English skill into entrepreneur that they will do? So they definitely think that entrepreneur is a promising job, because it's not like working in a bank, or it's not like being a teacher, or it's not being a lecturer. We are trying to find how much motivation that we can collect.
To describe about something, they're so silent, shy, unconfident. Yeah? But when I try to use blended learning, I ask them to describe about something, and then they just record by their mobile phone. They're so talkative. I don't know what happened. I thought that they know each other, they are friends. But why they are so nervous when they talk in front of their friends? Yeah? More creativity for students. When I ask some assignments, there are so many applications that can use to make some video, to make some story. Better prepare students, because in the beginning of the session, I had uploaded all the materials so they can learn it first, and then we can practice it at class. Yeah, teaching to diverse country skills, yeah, I believe that you already know about that. Less paperwork, even though this is speaking class, but there is still paper or assignment that students need to be collected to the lecture learning. Although
for teaching research in one place. Yeah, it means that you can put all the materials on research in online learning. Lower cost, students don't need to buy books or copy it or something. And better informed parents, there is perhaps several online learning that provides.
Okay, yes. Thank you, very good. Yes?
The materials that the teacher is going to teach is about academic things.
Academic things. Okay, very good. Okay, two giveaways. Take one. Be careful if you bite. Okay. Take one. Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you. Now let's see some theories on academic listening. This is from Saint Panya Mensing. Listening is categorized as receptive skill, similar with reading, but a much focused interpretation of academic listening would be listening to lectures, including also taking notes. These are some of the principles and what makes it different to just other listening classes. And then still from the same source, but it's from Lynch. It's also extended by including the participation of the students in a variety of other communicative events like team projects, tutorials, and seminars, and also meetings with supervisors and many more. So it's a bit extended. Okay. Where are we? Understanding relevant background knowledge, distinguishing important and unimportant information, and also taking notes. So those are some of the things that usually what we have in academic listening. So do you think this class is fun? Could be. Usually a bit heavy though. Now this is the academic listening course that we have in our faculty.
Salam sejahtera, sampurasun. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you still have to go on with this planning session. First of all, I would like to thank the committee for inviting me to be one of the moderators in this very important forum. To tell you the truth, this is a very nostalgic event for me because I did this kind of task assignment actually a long time ago. What I mean by a long time ago, it could be 30 years ago. But anyway, I really appreciate that I can be here this afternoon. My name is Yawan Sabana. I was born in May 10th, on May 10th. I would not mention the year. But I live in Jalan Sabana number 10. I work at ITB, Jalan Kanasa number 10 too. So 10 is my lucky number. I'm from Department of Art, Fine Art, Visual Art, Fakultas Rupa dan Desain ITB, Faculty of Art and Design ITB. And knowing from my hair, I'm the senior, the most senior, oldest teaching staff of our faculty and I believe ITB as well, and Wiseman. And allow me to read what I have got as CV. Dr. N. Wiseman is currently the team leader for an EU funding project, ISTEP, in surplus teacher education project based on the British Council in Sudan. and started teaching English and drama in UK mainstream schools. She then moved into TEFL, teaching in Italy and Egypt, and later managing an ELT project for DFLD in China. Later on, I would like to ask Dr. Ann to explain what all the abbreviations. After teaching at Leeds University and joined the British Council and held education and development posts in Iran, Bahrain, Oman, Peru, Macedonia, and Bulgaria, advising and supporting ministries of education on English teaching policy and strategy. More recently, she led the regional English programs in the Middle East and in Europe. Before moving to Sudan, she managed the British Council's ELT research development and publication section. Dr. Weissman has an MA in applied linguistics and a doctorate in education. NSE's research interests are qualitative evaluation using personal histories in research and the long-term impact of education intervention projects on educators. She has written and edited English course books for ministries of education in Hong Kong, China, and Bulgaria. It is the concise CV of Dr. Ann and Weissman. So if you have more to know, maybe later in the session. So, Dr. Ann, it is your time for presentation. Please.
Okay, good afternoon everybody.
Good afternoon.
I hope you're still awake and alive. It's definitely alive. Yes, as you can probably hear from my voice, and you've heard me coughing throughout the last 2 days, you'll know why I had to swap sessions with Martin. So thank you to Martin. Actually, it's very fortuitous, because following on from Howell's, the joint session this morning, there were lots of questions raised and issues and so on. And I'm not going to say that my presentation will answer them, but it follows on, I think you'll see quite neatly, because there are similar points. So without further ado, first of all, for a bit of setting, I put a picture of Bulgaria up there, so you've got a rough idea of what Bulgaria looks like. Okay, it's a long way from here. Small country, lots of greenery, lots of mountains. That's all you need to know for the moment. So I sort of thought about the title, and I sort of subtitled it as well, because it is around some of the questions which we were discussing this morning. How do we know, actually, that change has taken place, or that there has been an impact in CPD? So this is a little case study based on the research which I undertook. And again, a bit like how I should have rejigged the timing. Originally, I was writing about this as being 15 years ago. I went back 15 years ago. But actually, it's more like 20 years, I think. So quite a long time. So this is going to be, I'm going to show you now the outline of what I'm going to be doing. So it's the context, what the background was. Thinking about the rationale, why do we want to measure the long-term impact of CPD programs? And of course the big question, how? How do we measure them? How can we measure them? And what are some of the challenges which I'll be looking at? I'll then show you the results of, some of the results from the research which I undertook on this theme, with a conclusion. Okay, so the context. The context is this, so shout out if you know what the next, if you know what this is or what's happening there. Yeah. Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall. Right, sure you'll recognise that. Berlin Wall. I brought that up because that actually encompasses the context. The context that I was researching in, that I'm going back to, was 1990s. 1991, after the Berlin Wall had come down, I went to Bulgaria for the British Council as a project manager to work with the Ministry of Education. I was trying to think if there, I don't know my history of Indonesia very well, and I was trying to think if there was a parallel of a time when things suddenly changed. And Howard's nodding, so there obviously isn't. Sorry? 1998, so if any of you were around in 1998, perhaps there might be a parallel, and it won't be exactly the same, but try and sort of put that in context. So Berlin Wall came down, total infrastructure of the countries which had been communist-led, destroyed really overnight, virtually overnight. Economic, socially, politically, loads of changes taking place. And of course, from my point of view as an educator, education changes taking place. And in terms of language education, you can probably guess that one of the major changes was a switch, again, virtually overnight, from the teaching of Russian as a foreign language to the teaching of English as a foreign language. And it was almost like, okay, you Russian teachers of Russian, now you're going to teach English. But they didn't speak English, they didn't know English, etc., etc., etc. So a lot of issues there. And my role, along with the Bulgarian counterpart, was to help support these changes. And one of the ways we did this was to look at the trainer training that was going on, which had quite a few deficiencies at the time, and to try and build it up and develop a teacher training system with it for the whole country. I say the whole country, it's not as big as Indonesia at all. To develop a teacher training system. Now that obviously involved developing teacher trainers. So, in a nutshell, and this is just part of what I was doing, but it relates to this talk, I was working with the Bulgarian counterpart to develop a cohort of teacher trainers. So we developed a training course and project and CPD program. So that is what this talk back. And I'd written this in 1997. Can you read it from the back? I don't know if the font's big enough, but some people are nodding. Oh, Howard, can you read it? Oh, well, that must be right. So I'll let you read that. So that is my underlying thinking. What really? And this is 1997, I was saying, well, I wonder what the result will be. But the other rationale for the research was this comment, which was not just from one of the trainers. Later I decided to go back, as Howell and colleagues did, and think, well, hang on, what was the impact? And the big question really is that one. So what was the impact? And I started reading around and thinking what had been written. I think, well, surely people had done research before on the impact of CPD over a long period of time. And I mean, I've just put the names that you all know up there. People have written about the impact of CPD, yes, and the impact of the English language on the world. You're all familiar with Phillipson, I'm sure, linguistic imperialism, slightly destructive approach to what we do in English, and the same with Alistair Pennycook, language of colonialism. And then Adrian Holiday talking early on in 1994 about appropriate methodology and how, yes, it's all very well running a project or a CPD program, but it's not like sticking plaster. It won't always stick. There'll be this sort of tissue rejection if you don't look at the context, if you don't look at what's going on. Oh, and of course, I can't go without mentioning Martin Lamb, consequences of insects. So you run an inset program, you're on a CPD program, you think, right, that's good, they all know about, pair work and doing this and doing that. And then you go back and you find, actually, it's not quite what you'd intended, it's not quite what you thought you had been teaching and training, and it all sort of gets adapted and changed, which again raises very interesting questions. And of course, Simon Borg looks at teachers' beliefs in CPD programs. So, and putting all that up there to say, yes, there's a lot of work around the effect, the impact of teacher development programs. But what there hasn't been is a look at this, really, the connection between professional development and personal growth. Because to me, what we've had before, if you think back to the previous slide, is rather fragmented. It's looking at the teacher as quite rightly, as an educator. What do they do after the CPD program, when they go back to the classroom? Well, quite rightly, you ask that question. So, did that training that cost so much money, that took such a long time, did it work? And you look at them in the classroom and say, oh yes, this is something. But what people don't look at, for whatever reason, is the whole person. What happens outside the classroom? What's going on? And I think, Howell, you touched upon this a little bit when one of your colleagues said, well, because of risking fun, and I think you said it this morning, it changed my life. I'm in the job I am now because of risking fun. So there's a whole other element there. And Bryony Bevan has undertaken a little bit of research on this. She asked that question about the relationship between personal development and a professional development program. And as you can see, 92.3% of her respondents felt that their work and learning as teacher educators had led to personal development also. So, that leads me on to what I call the personal aspect, because that's really what the research developed into, looking at the personal. And I've got 3 quotes coming up. I've got 2 on this slide. These quotes are 2 educators, not ELT people who work very broadly. One who works in health education, actually, Barry McDonald. And they're quite damning in a way about how we evaluate or look at the impact of projects. The top one, Barry McDonald, talks about the heart. The heart is often ignored in program evaluation. And he also says at the bottom quote, evaluation should take the experience of program participants essential to the investigation. And a little bit more harshly, Savil Krishna says this. You can read it. And what I'd like to do just for a minute or two is talk to the person next to you, or along the row, and take any of those 3 quotations and see if you agree with them, or if you'd like to comment on them, or what your thoughts are on that. So there's Savil Krishna saying that actually evaluations are just instruments to advance people's own careers. It's quite critical. And Barry McDonald saying that when we look at how training programs, projects work, we don't actually ask the participants much about that. We look at other things like maybe numbers. So could you just discuss that for a minute, see what you think, and I'll ask your opinion.
So when it comes to making changes or just maybe more contributions, it all sometimes clashes with the what the policymakers want. So I think that generally happens
From bottom up, you cannot, or policymakers try to impose changes top down, but unless the teacher is like people at the bottom, I don't like to say bottom because they're not, I know what you mean, unless they decide and believe and say, yeah, that's a great idea, it's not going to happen. They'll say, yeah, and we've all been there, and it doesn't really happen unless you believe it. So yes, it's a good point. Any other?
To stay awake for the whole time during the conversation, I'm curious whether you will be talking about program evaluation in the later discussion, or what kind of research that you have. I believe you will be talking about it. It's just to...
Wait and see. I'll
Yeah,
move on.
that's why I just want to make me stay awake to fully join your presentation. Thank you.
As you know, the point is that the subject of this talk is about researching long-term impact. And it's going back 20 years or so. So another quick question before I put it all up on the screen. Going back 20 years, Hal mentioned some of the issues, but what, and you can shout this out, you go back 20 years to find out what was the impact of the programme. What would be some of the problems? How easy is it? How difficult is it? What would be some of the challenges that are thrown up? Any thoughts you can shout out? I said that these are the only people I can talk to. They understand where I'm coming from, in a way. So that was one very positive that we could see. But with that development of being a teacher trainer, they also gained status and they gained a lot of respect. And they got new job opportunities and a lot of self-confidence as well. So it wasn't just changing the role, but a lot of things that went with it as well. And the community, it's a cyclical thing, really. The community of practice gave people confidence, and with that they then became better, if you like, teacher trainers and developed further. There was a lot of talk about emotions. Some trainers found it quite traumatic. And one person talks about it there. I suspect it's because it was such a big change from what they'd been used to. Changing thinking, a change in background, a change in everything they perhaps believed in. It made it quite an emotional time for them. And emotions came up time and time again as a theme in interviews. And again, linking back to what I was saying previously, changing pedagogic beliefs and values. In Bulgaria, teacher training is mostly about linguistics. There was a little bit of pedagogy, not much classroom practice, but it was all about learning English, if it was an English teacher, and developing knowledge about English, and perhaps knowledge about teaching, but very little about teaching practice. And of course,
then you may, the method, if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned that you make the outcome become the narrative, and the narrative, and you may also mention, if I'm not mistaken, that you were also involved in the program. So was that the narrative also include your story as well? Like the autobiographical. Is there any involvement in there, or only pure from the respondent? How many respondents? 6 or?
just repeat the question again, sorry.
Okay, sorry. So my interest is on the narrative inquiry, because you mentioned that the outcome of your data is in form of narrative.
Yeah, something.
Yeah, and then does it involve your story as well in that narrative, or?
Yes and no, because I was there all the time anyway. My stories with the same stories, if you see what I mean. I was part of the stories that were told because I was there at the time, and they'd say, oh yeah, you did this and you did that. My story is interwoven in there, and certainly at the end of the thesis I write about the journey that I took from a personal point of view. Does that answer your question?
Yes, because I just want to confirm whether, because now I'm doing the research with the narrative inquiry too, so I'm trying to convince myself whether what I'm doing also right, that I also integrate my personal experience into the.
I didn't do that. No, I simply took stories. I transcribed everything, and within that transcription there'd be a bit of conversation, and then a story would come in. So I wasn't asking for stories. They just when I said the outcomes, this is what emerged. I didn't say tell me a story, but some little snippets of stories really came out. Like, I remember a time when da-da-da-da, and that was a story that came through. So that's why I called it an outcome, because there were stories, but there was also reflections and questions and all sorts of narratives coming through in different ways. So how
CPD program that you mentioned, because I think throughout the presentation I was just wondering whether we're talking about the same thing here. So it's a course, like a summer long course, because here CPD for teachers is not as rigorous, it's not as structured, and some of the studies done by our students in UP revealed that teachers did not benefit so much that they felt it's irrelevant, that they felt it's so short, that it's so down, very technical, not relevant to the teaching context. So I think the way we provide CPD in Indonesia is far less structured or visionary or beneficial or serious in terms of thinking of teachers' professional development in a profound way. If you talk to Pak Fuad, I read his work and he said like professional development in Indonesia has not been working as we can see in the teaching practice in the classroom because of these problems. And another thing is that many of the research done by our students shows that the term experienced and novice teachers, when they compare how they teach, how they form questions, how they manage classroom, didn't say reveal differences, meaning that experienced teachers did not reflect the continuous development just because they teach longer. It didn't mean that really experienced more better teachers in the classroom. So just for clarification of that.
Along with my Bulgarian colleague, we designed the CPD program. I call it CPD. It was a training program to help a developing country or a country that had undergone an amazing transformation and then an urgent need for some help to get teacher training on track rather than a pedagogue talking for 2 hours at somebody and do what to do and don't do what to do and say reverse. So we and my Bulgarian colleague was very open to suggestions and very up to date. So we had that luxury and we designed the training. And then we involved the trainers on the course would say, right now, what do you feel you need, what should we do next? It was very much a sort of developing course. We would meet every 3 times a year actually, and have a special course. And then there'd be the next year and the next year. It was very developmental. But we were lucky, we had a grant to do that.
Understand that your methodology was based on trying to understand the experiences of your key, some of your key participants. You meant 6. I just wondered whether you initially perhaps had bigger ambitions to try to understand impact, because one could argue that your approach was quite narrow, and you went for depth, but it was quite narrow in that it was looking at the personal and professional, the impact on a few people, really, when the project was designed to help the Bulgarian people, develop the Bulgarian education system. For example, did you ask your participants what they believed the impact on the system was?
Yeah.
Was that recorded in your results?
Yes, it was, because obviously, they asked about what they felt the impact was on the whole country. But to go back to the beginning of that question, yes, I thought long and hard about it, going much wider. But I didn't want to fall into the trap, if you like, of it being a project evaluation, because that could be done by other means. So it wasn't a project evaluation, it was looking at how people are affected by particular points in time, or courses like Risking Fun, or like this training program, the impact it can have. One would want to go further and more to prove further points. This was not to be a project evaluation. It wasn't looking at the project and how successful it was in helping Bulgaria. It was looking at its impact and its net impact on some of the participants, to just add to some resources there already.
Other questions, because it's from my field find out. But I would just like to comment that this is very interesting topic, very interesting methodology of trying to get some outcomes by finally do it in the form of narratives, right? This procedure, this methodology reminds me of my field, art. I feel that this is very artistic methodology by trying to come closer to the people and just compile whatever the people told you, the researcher. And it's very similar to what is an art making like. So we come to the people and then come closer and try to get something from them, whatever it is, whatever they are. But then we conclude, the artists conclude that this is something that you can express, that you can do as narratives, as visual narratives. Give applause to Dr. Anna. Go back to the meeting, please.
To promote reading and writing skills. Okay, without further ado, Ibu, you can deliver your presentation.
Yeah, I prefer this because I teach literary theory. And if men only can use Mr., then we can use Miss with Z or something like that one. Although I am Mrs., but I prefer that one because from my friends, my colleagues who promote this kind of labels for us. Right. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming here. I just have a kind of imagination that this session is going to be only 3 people, the moderator, me, and also one of my friends, here, because he promised me to take my picture. Yeah. So she has to be here. Okay, but thank you that you come to my session. And if I show you this word, what comes into your mind? What is that? Do you have any idea? Do you know?
First, like canvas.
Yeah. This morning my husband said that you missed one letter, S. I said no. That's the word. I said like that one. Do you have any idea?
Is described by Mr. Martin yesterday
Okay.
to create poster.
Yes. Okay. I heard also from
never used it.
Right. Yeah. I heard that from Pak Jati yesterday, and he said that this kind of application cannot help to improve your language much. I take this kind of title to be my presentation today. If this kind of application cannot help. In fact, I found that there is 2 kinds of skills. Those are reading and also writing that can be promoted using this kind of application. That's why I would like, my name is Mia Fitri Agustina, I come from Unsud. If you do not know Unsud, there in Purwokerto in Central Java, partner with Cilacap, Universitas Jenderal Sudirman. Because when I said this one, sometimes people do not know. Where's that? And that's so sad only. Alright, I'm going to talk about using Canva to promote reading and writing skill, right? So what is Canva? I would like to give you a very simple definition, and this is that I use for a long time. An application to make graphic an expert. I love this because I do not think that I am a Z generation. Y generation? No, I'm old generation. Trying to be Z generation because I have students. They are about 18, 19, so the objective of the blended learning is not really effective. Yeah, I would like to train actually their independent. Yeah, to browse all of the resources by using Google Classroom,
but not all students are ready for that. And the others is maybe the reason why I want to conduct this research is because I want to evaluate my way in designing the syllabus and lesson plan to find the effective way to engage the independence of my students in using blended learning, because sometimes it is not easy to ask them to participate online. And then sometimes most of my students prefer to use printed textbook. So even if I have uploaded everything in Google Classroom, maybe some of them have not read the material when they come to the class. Yeah, so it's quite challenging to use blended learning because there are many materials they have to read, there are many projects they have to do, and there are a very long process when to tell you and share with you just in case if next you would like to practice or you would like to do blended learning in your class. Maybe I hope that my research can be one of your references. I want to really study this subject. Unfortunately, there are some problems. Those are some problems. Lack of references. It's not easy to find this kind of books in Indonesia. If it's one in Mericulous, it will be very, very expensive. Each book could be more than 200,000. Especially the fifth one, it could be even millions. Okay? Of course, it becomes low motivation for the students because there is no book that they can analyze, they can read. Okay? And of course, there is also poor assessment. I realized that this could be a solution. Okay? What kind of multimodalities that we use? First, in the teaching process, we use flip teaching strategy. Anyone knows flip teaching? Flip is the other way around of the, okay? And the discussion of the theory is in the class, but it's in the other way around. We give some sources by using Google. I have to find first before the class starts, and I ask them to make a WA group with all the links that relate to concept and theory of children literature through their WA group, and they learn it at home discussion with their friends. And if it's during the class, we only discuss and give assignment related to the theory. And then the online
Actually, I with my supervisors created it. I will start with the abstract. So this article is entitled Thesis Selection Student of Yayasan Pantara Jakarta. It is a psycholinguistic study. And then the purpose of the study is to receive an understanding about advantages and experiences by several dyslexic students between 8 to 10 years old who are studying in the second to 4th grade in Sekolah Dasar Yayasan Pantara Jakarta. It is a very special school which is located in Jalan Tebet Raya, Jakarta Pusat. And for your information, this is the first school which established a special school for dyslexia students. And the main theory used for this study